number 7? Yes, number 7. My dear Wormwood, through this girl and her disgusting family, the patient is now getting to know more Christians daily, and very intelligent Christians too. For some time it'll be quite impossible to remove spirituality from his life. Very well then, we must corrupt it. No doubt, you've often practiced transforming yourself into an angel of light as a parade ground exercise. Now is the time to do it in the face of the enemy. The world and the flesh have failed us. A third power remains. And success of this third kind is the most glorious of all. A spoiled saint, a Pharisee, an inquisitor, or a magician makes better sport in hell than a mere common tyrant or debauchee. Looking around at your patient's new friends, I find that the best point of attack would be the borderline between theology and politics. Several of his new friends are very much alive to the social implications of their religion. That in itself is a bad thing, but good can be made of it. You will find that a good many Christian political writers think that Christianity began going wrong and departing from the doctrines of its founder at a very early age. Now this idea must be used by us to encourage once again the conception of a historical Jesus, to be found by clearing away later accretions and perversions, and then to be contrasted with the whole Christian tradition. In the last generation, we promoted the construction of such a historical Jesus on liberal humanitarian lines. Now we are putting forward a new historical Jesus on Marxian, catastrophic, and revolutionary lines. The advantages of these constructions, which we intend to change every 30 years or so, are manifold. In the first place, they all tend to direct men's devotions to something which does not exist. For each historical Jesus is unhistorical. The documents say what they say, and cannot be added to. Each new historical Jesus, therefore, has to be got out of them by suppression at one point and exaggeration at another. And by that sort of guessing, brilliant is the adjective we teach the humans to apply to it, on which no one would risk 10 shillings in ordinary life, but which is enough to produce a crop of new Napoleons, new Shakespeares, and new Swifts in every publisher's autumn list. In the second place, all such constructions place the importance of their historical Jesus in some particular theory he is supposed to have promulgated. He has to be a great man in the modern sense of the word, one standing at the terminus of some centrifugal and unbalanced line of thought, a crank vending panacea. Thus, we distract men's mind from who he is and what he did. We first make him solely a teacher, and then concede the very substantial agreement between his teachings and those of all other great moral teachers. For humans must not be allowed to notice that all great moralists are sent by the enemy, not to inform them, but to remind them, to reinstate the primeval moral platitudes against our continual concealment of them. We make the sophist. He raises up a Socrates to answer them. Our third aim is, by these constructions, to destroy the devotional life. For the real presence of the enemy, otherwise experienced by men in prayer and sacrament, we substitute merely probable, remote, shadowy, and an uncouth figure, one who spoke a strange language and died a long time ago. Such an object, in fact, cannot be worshipped. Instead of the Creator adored by its creature, you soon have merely a leader acclaimed by a partisan, and finally a distinguished character approved by a judicious historian. And fourthly, besides being unhistorical in the Jesus it depicts, religion of this kind is false to history in another sense. No nation and few individuals are really brought into the enemy's camp by the historical study of the biography of Jesus, simply as a biography. Indeed, materials for a full biography have been withheld from men. Their earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption, operating on a sense of sin which they already had. And sin, not against some new fancy dress law produced as a novelty by a great man, but against the old platitudinous, universal moral law which they had been taught by their nurses and mothers. The Gospels come later, and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. The historical Jesus, then, however dangerous he may seem to be at us at some particular point, is always to be encouraged. About the general connection between Christianity and politics, our position is more delicate. Certainly, we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life, for the establishment of anything that, like a really just society, would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and very much want, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably, of course, as a means to their own advancement, but failing that, as a means to anything, even social justice. One thing to do is to get men at first to value social justice as a thing which the enemy demands, and then work him onto a stage where he values Christianity because it may produce social justice. For the enemy will not be used as a convenience. Men or nations who think that they can revive the faith in order to make a good society may as well just think that they can use the stars of heaven as a shortcut to the nearest chemist shop. Unfortunately, it's quite easy to coax humans around this little corner. Only today I found a passage in a Christian writer where he recommends his own version of Christianity on the ground that only such a faith can outlast the death of old cultures and the birth of new civilizations. You see, this little rift? Believe this not because it's true, but for some other reason. That's the game. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. My dear Wormwood, I've been in correspondence with Slim Trumpet, who is in charge of your patient's young woman, and begin to see a chink in her armor. It is an unobtrusive little vice which she shares with nearly all women, who, having grown up in an intelligent circle united by a clearly defined belief, and it consists in a quite untroubled assumption that the outsiders who do not share this belief are really too stupid and ridiculous. The males who habitually meet these outsiders do not feel that way. Their confidence, if they are confident, is of a different kind. Hers, which she supposes to be due to faith, is in reality largely due to the mere color she has taken from her surroundings. It is not, in fact, very different from the conviction she would have felt at the age of 10, that the kind of fish knives used in her father's house were proper or normal, or the real kind, while those of her neighboring families were not real fish knives at all. Now, the element of ignorance and naivete in all this is so large, and the element of spiritual pride so small, that it gives us little hope of the girl herself. But have you thought of how it can be made to influence your own patients? It is always the novice who exaggerates. The man who has risen in society is over-refined. The young scholar is pedantic. In this new circle, Your patient is a novice. He's in there daily, meeting a Christian life of quality, and a quality he'd never imagined before, and seeing it all through an enchanted glass because he's in love. He's anxious. Indeed, the enemy commands him to imitate this quality. Can you get him to imitate this defect in his mistress, and to exaggerate it, until what is venal in her becomes in him the strongest and most beautiful of the vices, spiritual pride? The conditions seem ideally favorable. The new circle in which he finds himself is one of which he is tempted to be proud for many reasons other than its Christianity. It is a better educated, more intelligent, more agreeable society than any he has yet encountered. He is also under some degree of illusion as to his own place in it. Under the influence of love, he may still think himself unworthy of the girl, but he is rapidly ceasing to think unworthy of the others. He has no notion how much in time He has no notion how much in him is forgiven because they are charitable and made the best of because he is now one of the family. He does not dream how much of his conversation, how many of his opinions are recognized by them all as mere echoes of their own. Still less does he suspect how much of the delight he takes in these people is due to the erotic enchantment which the girl, for him, spreads over all her surroundings. He thinks that he likes their talk and way of life because of some congruity between their spiritual state and his, when in fact they are so far beyond him that if he were not in love, he would be merely puzzled and repelled by much of which he now accepts. He is like a dog which would imagine it understood firearms because its hunting instinct and love for the master enable it to enjoy a day's shooting. Here's your chance. While the enemy, by means of sexual love, of some kind of agreeable people far advanced in his service, is drawing the young barbarian up to levels he would never otherwise have reached, you must make him feel that he is finding his own level, that these people are his sort, and that, coming among them, he has come home. When he turns from them to other society, he will find it dull, partly because almost any society within his reach is, in fact, much less entertaining, but still more because he misses the enchantment of the young woman. You must teach him to mistake this contrast between the circle that delights and the circle that bores him for the contrast between Christian and unbelievers. He must be made to feel, he'd better not put it into words, how different we Christians are. And by we Christians he must really, but unknowingly, mean my set. And by my set he must mean not the people who in their charity and humility have accepted me, but the people with whom I associate by right. Success here depends on confusing him. If you can make him explicitly and professedly proud of being a Christian, you will find you will probably fail. Let's try this cigarette. Yeah, that's what my subconscious needs. Concentration help. Okay, let's try again. Success here depends on confusing him. If you try to make him explicitly and professedly proud of being a Christian, you'll probably fail. The enemy's warnings are well too known. If, on the other hand, you let the idea of we Christians drop out altogether and merely make him complacent about his set, you will produce not true spiritual pride, but mere social vanity, which, by comparison, is trumpery, or is a triumphary, puny little sin. What do you want to do is keep a sly self-congratulation mixing with all of his thoughts, and never allow him to raise the question, what precisely am I congratulating myself about? The idea of belonging to an inner ring of being is a secret is very sweet to him. Play on that nerve. Teach him, using the influence of this girl, when she is silliest, to adopt an air of amusement at the things the unbelievers say. Some theories which he may meet in modern Christian circles may here prove helpful. Theories, that place the hope of society in some inner ring of clerks, some trained minority of theocrats. It is no affairs of yours whether those theories are true or false. The great thing is to make Christianity a mystery religion in which he feels himself one of the initiates. Pray, do not fill your letters with rubbish about this European war. Its final issue is no doubt important, but that is a matter for the High Command. I am not in the least interested in knowing how many people in England have been killed by bombs. In what state of mind they died, I can learn from the office at this end. That they are going to die sometime, I know already. Please keep your mind on your work. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. My dear Wormwood, the real trouble about the set your patient is living in is that it is merely Christian. They all have individual interests, of course, but the bond remains mere Christianity. If men become Christians at all, it's to keep them in a state of mind I call Christianity and. Christianity and the crisis, Christianity and the new psychology, Christianity and the new order, Christianity and faith healing, Christianity and psychological research, Christianity and vegetarianism, Christianity and spelling reform. If there must be Christians, let them at least be Christians with a difference. Substitute for the faith itself some fashion with a Christian coloring. Work on their horror of the same old thing. The horror of the same old thing is one of the most valuable passions we have produced in the human heart, an endless source of heresies in religion, folly in counsel, infidelity in marriage, and inconsistency in friendship. The humans live in time and experience relative success. The humans live in time and experience reality successively. To experience much of it, therefore, they must experience many things. In other words, they must experience change. And since they need change, the enemy, being a hedonist at heart, has made change pleasurable to them, just as he made eating pleasurable. But since he does not wish them to make change any more than eating an end in itself, he has balanced the love of change in them by a love of permanence. He has contrived to gratify both tastes together in the very world he made. By that union of change and permanence which we call rhythm, he gives them the seasons, each season different, yet every year the same, so that spring will always be felt as a novelty, yet always as a reoccurrence of a memorial theme. He gives them in his church a spiritual year. They change from a fast to a feast, but It is the same feast as before. Now, we just pick out and exaggerate the pleasure of eating to produce gluttony. So, we pick out the natural pleasantness of change and twist it into a demand for absolute novelty. This demand is entirely our workmanship. If we neglect our duty, men would not only contend, but be transported by the mixed novelty and familiarity of snowdrops this January, sunrise this morning, plum pudding this Christmas. Children, until we have taught them better, will be perfectly happy with a seasonal round of games in which conkers succeed hopscotch as regularly as autumn follows summer. Only by our incessant efforts is the demand for infinite, for unrhythmical change kept up. This demand is valuable in various ways. In the first place, it diminishes pleasure while increasing desire. The pleasure of novelty is by its very nature more subject than any other to the law of diminishing returns. The continued novelty costs no money. And continued novelty costs money, so that the desire for it spells avarice or unhappiness or both. And again, the more rapacious this desire, the sooner it must eat up all the innocent sources of pleasure and pass it on to those the enemy forbids. Thus, by inflaming the horror of the same old thing, we have recently made the arts, for example, less dangerous to us than perhaps they ever have been. Lowbrow and highbrow artists alike are now daily drawn into fresh, and still fresh, excesses of lasciviousness, unreason, cruelty, and pride. Finally, the desire for novelty is indispensable if we are to produce fashions or vogues. The use of fashions in thought is to distract the attention of men from their real dangers. We direct the fashionable outcry of each generation against those vices of which it is least in danger, and fix its approval on the virtue nearest to the vice which we are trying to make endemic. The game is to have them all running around with fire extinguishers whenever there is a flood, and all crowding at the side of the boat, which is nearly gunwale under. Thus, we make it fashionable to expose the dangers of enthusiasm at the very moment when they are really becoming worldly and lukewarm. A century later, when we are really making them all Byronic. A century later, when we are really making them all Byronic and drunk with emotion, the fashionable outcry is directed against the dangers of mere understanding. Cruel ages are put on their guard against sentimentality, feckless and idle ones against respectability, lecherous ones against Puritanism. And whenever all men are really hastening to be slaves or tyrants, we make liberalism seem the prime bogey. But the greatest triumph of all is to elevate this horror of the same old thing into a philosophy, so that nonsense in the intellect may reinforce corruption in the will. It is here that the general evolutionary or historical character of modern European thought, partly our work, comes in so usefully. The enemy loves platitudes of a proposed course of action. He wants men, so far as I can see, to ask very simple questions. Is it righteous? Is it prudent? Is it possible? Now, if we could keep men asking, is it in accordance with the general movement of our time? Is it progressive or reactionary? Is it the way that history is going? They will neglect the relevant questions. And the questions they do ask are, of course, unanswerable. For they do not know the future. What the future will be depends largely on just those choices, which now they invoke the future to help them make. As a result, while their minds are buzzing in this vacuum, we have the better chance to slip in and bend them to the action we have decided on. And the great work has already been done. Once they know that some changes were for the better and others were for the worse, and others, again, indifferent. I didn't understand that sentence I just read. Blah, 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 blah. Granny can't read. Okay, the great work has already been done. Once they know that some of the changes were for the better, and others for the worse, and others, again, indifferent, we have largely removed this knowledge. For the descriptive adjective unchanged, we have substituted the emotional adjective stagnant. We have trained them to think of the future as a promised land which favored heroes attained, not as something which everyone reaches at the rate of 60 minutes an hour, whether he does, whoever he is. Your affectionate Uncle Screwtape. Okay. Alright, time for that break. Time for break. Need break. Need break. Baby.